Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this discussion on industrialization and sustainable development within the context of the 5th meeting of the heads of government and this conference on the 16+1 forum. My name is Pauls Rauceps. I'm a journalist here in Latvia, and in today's panel we have the honor of a very distinguished group of panelists to discuss questions regarding manufacturing, industrialization, and sustainable development within the context of the 16+1 cooperation. As we know, markets around the world demand industrial policy, revision, and innovative solutions in manufacturing, and while a lot can be achieved by sustainable financing, governments and entrepreneurs themselves must take smart steps to revitalize industries as we know them today. The panel discussion will address the latest trends region-wide, as well as the potential of cooperation and synergy among the 16+1 countries in industrial development and related infrastructure, in the supply chains, information and communication technologies, and other innovative solutions, looking at where to invest, why to invest, and how we can cooperate. As I said, we have a very distinguished panel, which I'm honored to be leading. First speaker will be Martin Kazaks. He's the Deputy Chief Economist of Swedbank. We also have Mr. Kuai Baoping. I hope I pronounced that right. He's the Chairman of the Board of China Guodian Corporation. We have Mr. Guan Yun. He is the Vice President of Huawei Technologies, responsible for Central and Eastern Europe and the Nordic region. And finally, we have Mr. Corneliu Bodea. He's the President of the Romanian Energy Center and the coordinator of the Center for Dialogue and Cooperation on Energy Projects for the 16+1. We will have presentations from all our speakers, then we'll have a panel discussion among ourselves, and finally, we'll open the floor for questions from the audience. But as our first speaker, I'd like to invite Mr. Kazaks, please.
Thank you, Pauls. Ladies and gentlemen, what I shall do, I shall very quickly just set the scene of some of the macro points of discussion that we will talk in more detail later on. But let me start. Let me start to talk a bit about the CEE economies as such. You know, what has been driving the growth, and then to come back to some of the global trends that are affecting us now, and that will affect us in the future. And that will affect, of course, the way we work and the way we think in terms of the industrialization and also the transport sector and things like that. Okay, so if you take a look at the CEE economies, the growth has been very fast. If you take a look at the bold lines, you can see the Baltic countries and Latvia, for that matter, the darkest one. Over the last 20 years, there's been a remarkable improvement in productivity and incomes. If we started something in the range of 30% of the German GDP per capita and purchasing power parity terms, now we are about 50 to 60%. So the last 20 years have been years of very remarkable growth, so very fast. If you take a look at the Latvian numbers, you know, the incomes and productivity has more than tripled in those 20 years. If you take a look at the average speed of growth, it's something like 7% per annum in PPS terms. If you take a look at other European countries, and here you can see the top line for Italy, and that's all as percent of the German level, Spain, we are not that far from those countries. Okay, so in terms of productivity, in terms of the economy is being complicated, and what are the income levels, we are approaching the average EU countries. If you take a look at what has been driving the growth, there is much of the story here, it's trade. And I borrowed this chart from a colleague of mine from the Bank of Latvia, Anders Strasts, and what you can see here, you can see the more successful the countries have been in terms of their ability to grow exports, the better has been the income growth. Okay, so for the CEE economies, trade is very, very important. And that is understandable because the societies are relatively small, they are also shrinking and aging, so the way to grow is to export. And if you take a look at the Latvian numbers, then we've seen that exports of goods and services in those 20 years have more than tripled. Okay, if you take a look at nominal terms, you know, it's nearly 10 times higher than it used to be. So the sectors can grow massively. And if you take a look at the share of exports, then that share, of course, is very big. If the world average for exports in GDP is nearly 30%, then for CE economies, for most of CE economies, with the exception of Albania, the numbers are significantly above that. For the Baltic countries, it's at least twice of that. So we are very much export-oriented. And anything that happens around, what happens in the global markets, in the global demand areas, then of course it affects us very, very quickly. If we take a look at the growth prospects for the CE economies, and Latvia for that matter, of course, we see that exports will remain the major long-term driver of growth. So any way we can grow the exports in the CE region, that's going to help us to grow. And that's what the economies are trying to do as well. So the global environment is extremely important. So if you take a look at specifically the Latvian export sector, what we can see that the sector is quite well diversified in terms of both products and markets, and is growing both smarter, larger, more internationalized. If you take a look at the share of the exports of goods, it's more than 12 billion euros a year. If you take a look at the services, much smaller for now, but quite rapidly growing at the moment, about 4 billion euros. Largest sectors in goods is machinery, equipment, food, wood products. If you take a look at the exports of services, of course, the major sector by far is the transport services. I'm going to highlight some of the issues there a bit later on as well. But we also see, you know, sectors as like, you know, tourism, ICT, business services. All these sectors are expanding quite briskly. What about the global trends? And there are many of them. And we can discuss them in length as well. But let me just touch a couple of them that will affect us. One of those trends, which of course is challenging, but it provides lots of opportunities, is globalization. And let me narrow it down a bit, not globalization per se, but talk a bit more about trade. And if you take a look at the chart, what we can see that unfortunately, over the past few years, we've seen that growth in trade has slowed down. In the past, over the last 20, 25 years, we've seen that trade growth, and that is the red dashed line, has been growing much faster than GDP. So the economies have become more open, and the trade has been growing faster than GDP. Unfortunately, for the last few years, we see these trends turning. There are a couple of reasons for that, at least. One of them is that there is weak investment activity. And if investment activity is weak, it's more imports and exports intensive, so there is a tendency for exports growth to slow down. We see China restructuring, changing its growth model more towards consumption, and that's also one of the explanations why export growth has been smaller. We see that trade-intensive advanced economies are growing slower. Unfortunately, we also see implications from populism and protectionism. And if you take a look at the trade deals over the last few years, they've been very slow to come through. So the trade environment is less friendly now than it used to be a few years ago. And taking into account the populistic influences, taking into account what is happening with different trade agreements, it's quite likely that the global economy will become more protectionist. And that is going to affect CE negatively because we benefit from trade. And therefore, our aim should be to see how we can support trade. If you take a look at the Baltic region, and Latvia for that matter, of course, Russia is a very important player. And what we've seen over the last few years, that not only Russian economy going into deep recession, but also it seems that the recovery that's going to be there is going to be much smaller than we've seen before. So there's a risk of stagnation. That means Russia is going to generate less trade flows itself. At the same time, Russia moving its trade flows through its own ports also means that the transit flows that we get through the Baltics have come down and will most likely keep coming down. But this is not only a challenge, it's also an opportunity because infrastructure is there, okay? So there is opportunities for other business to appear through other trade flows. We also have seen that this negative shock that we had from the Russian recession and also the weakness of the ruble and also sanctions has made the Latvian economy and Baltic economy overall to try to integrate more into other markets. So it has pushed the economies to become much more integrated in the EU, and that is good for future growth, I would say. And it's not only the EU, it's also the global economy overall. So globalization will certainly be one of the things that's going to shape future growth. Okay? Supply chains, new supply chains, yeah, new trade flows, this is what we are looking into. Climate change. And here the Baltics and Latvia, for that matter, are quite nicely positioned. We are green, we have clean energy, one of the cleanest countries in the world. We have good tourism opportunities, very much untapped so far. We have good possibilities for organic food and all these kind of things, which is not only trendy, but also going to shape the future for the years to come. So climate change, we are benefiting from that. There are also other trends that I'm not going to go into details. Some of the other speakers will touch them much more, like digitalization. You know, that is one important trend that will affect us. Okay? It's not only new things, it's also job destruction in some areas, but that opens up opportunities to employ people somewhere else. And this is also demographics, aging, you know, less people, aging societies, shrinking demography, especially if you talk about this region in the European context. So overall, all these things, what they've done already and what will happen more in the future is that industry clusters will deepen. Okay? They will become more complicated, they will widen, they will spread into other industries, and they will become increasingly international. And we see that in the past trade data. For instance, Latvia increasingly integrated into the European economy, into Scandinavian countries. So clusters are increasingly important, and they will just, there's no way they will not deepen. And there are many things we can see that. For instance, the same traditional industries like wood industry, wood manufacturing, and here the example of Latvijas Finieris, Latvian plywood company. They are extending into other industries, like chemical industry. They're extending into investing into other countries. It's not like we are the kind of only the receivers of FDI. We're also investing ourselves. Similar example is UPB, which is originally construction-related industry. It has moved into the energy sector, it has moved into the IT and services, and able to supply services to others. So they become more complicated. Same thing about ICT-related business services and things like that. And it's not only the companies that are doing it. The nice thing is that we have EU support. So EU support both for building up new infrastructure, but also to improve the labor market skills, labor market efficiency. And the government has been trying to improve the business environment as well. So if you take a look at different measures like doing business and all these kind of things, we are gradually climbing up in terms of business environment. Of course, there's still lots to do, okay? But growth is pushing for these things. So global trends are going to be increasingly important for the CE economies. The only way for those economies to grow long-term and fast in a sustainable way is to grow exports, to become increasingly international and try to pick the best skills, the best things that we have abroad and implement them here. And that opens up lots of, to my mind, from macro point of view, lots of opportunities for future cooperation. And much of the infrastructure is already here, and there's lots of support to create other infrastructure as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin. I think you've given us a very good framework for the discussion about how these investments, what environment will be taking place. Our next speaker is Mr. Kiao Baoping. And he will be looking specifically at green energies, renewable energies, and the opportunities there. Please. Mr. Malcolm.
Dear moderator, ladies and gentlemen, friends, it is my great pleasure to be here to attend the 6th China CEEC Forum on Industrialization and Sustainable Development. This is my first time to be here in Latvia. When I was in Beijing, we had quite a heavy smog there. But here in Riga, you have heavy snow here. Your country is very beautiful, and I'm very impressed by that. It is my special pleasure to be here to join the delegation together with our Premier Li Keqiang to Riga. We hope that we could have in-depth exchange with Latvia government and enterprises to seek opportunities for cooperation and to contribute to the development of Latvia. Here, I'd like to take this opportunity to briefly talk about China Guodian Corporation. China Guodian Corporation is a large-scale power generator. We are also one of the Global 500. In terms of installed capacity, we have 140 million kilowatts of installed capacity, number 3 in the world. We have over 800 billion RMB asset. What do I mean by 140 million kilowatts? Well, we often joke about it. It's about 1/10 of the domestic total. When you look up, then 1 out of 10 bulbs is lit by us.
环保也是我们国电集团的2个亮点啊。这个风电我们集团的装机规模是2400万千瓦时，这个规模是世界排名第1啊，世界排名第1。同时呢，我们的大机组60万以上的。
Sorry, at the same time, our capacity is half of it is the high efficiency of 600,000 kilowatts. And in all the indexes, we're very advanced in the world. In all indexes, we are the most advanced in the world. And also our energy saving and environmental solutions. We have very good technologies in wind power and desulfurization, denitrification units, and also plasma ignition technologies. Early this year, I accompanied President Xi and visit Republic of Czech, and we signed some agreements. We are proactively pushing our wind power and energy-saving development in Central Europe. And our PV modules is also exported to Germany, Romania, and countries like that, and we have been greatly praised for it. And also, our overseas departments have worked a lot in South Africa and have 240,000 units of wind power. And also in Canada, we have 100,000 units of wind power facilities. So this time in Latvia, we hope that this opportunity and platform will provide us with some opportunities for cooperation. As European emerging economies, CEE regions is in the core region of Belt and Road Initiative. Also, it's an important hub of the Silk Road economic belt. You have a great location, relatively low cost of labor, and you have very good power in technology innovation. recent years, CE countries highly value the clean energy development. China and CE countries have both historical heritage, and we can complement each other, and we have high will to work with each other. Especially in clean renewable energies, we have great potentials. In China, recently, we are the world's first, the biggest energy country. We've reached 1.5 kilowatts of 1.5 billion kilowatts of capacity, and our coal technologies are leading the world. So One Belt One Road initiative promotes going global. It's not just about exporting the overcapacity of China, but also exporting the advanced technology of China. For example, wind power, we have 300 million kilowatts, and it's growing. So we hope we can bring the good technologies abroad, especially in Latvia. We hope to have a good project of cooperation and provide opportunities for win-win in sustainable development in CE countries. So that's my brief introduction. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker will be Mr. Guan Yun. As I said, he's the Vice President of Huawei Technologies in Central and Eastern Europe and in the Nordic countries. And he will be talking about his company's vision for high-tech development. Please, Mr. Huawei.
Thank you. 尊敬的主持人
Distinguished moderator, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Industry and the sustainable development are something that all governments pay attention to, and a lot of them have been in our strategy. For example, in China, we have the 2025, and in Germany, you have the Industry 4.0. So both strategies are working together already. So I'll take Industry 4.0 as an example, and I'd like to share how Huawei, as a world-leading ICT provider, how we're working with other partners. We're using ICT technologies to promote sustainable development. After 29 years of development, Huawei is the biggest ICT provider, solution providers in the world. So far, we have 170,000 employees, and 50% of them work in R&D. That's why we have very strong R&D powers to satisfy needs from different sectors and clients. We operate in more than 170 countries and serve 1/3 of the world population. So for the past 3 decades, we are focusing on connecting the people around the world. We're an expert in connectivity. So far, Huawei is divided into 3 business groups: carrier, enterprise, and consumer. I'm responsible for the Nordic enterprise BG. In this process of my work, I found that innovative ICT technologies can be combined with our clients' needs and create great power. ICT is reshaping the operation and structure of enterprises. It's not just a technology, but it's also a commercialized solution for the sector. I have 2 examples here. This is China's biggest, also the globe's biggest coal company. That's its heavy load electric locomotive. The length is 2,500 meters, and the capacity is 20,000 tons. And how do we work the 3 locomotives together? They need to have real-time reactions with each other. And this is a heavy load locomotives. How do we have a real-time monitor of security based on the the previous Wi-Fi and GSMF technology is not enough. So we're providing broadband signals, and we have solved the real-time monitoring of these locomotives. And the newest update is that the 4,000 meters locomotives have been successful in our experiments. And another example, in this meeting, there are a lot of friends from our media to conduct interviews. We know that a high-resolution, high-definition cameras create millions of data every day, and it cannot be transmitted real-time to the studio. So after one day, maybe our friends from the media need to bring a lot of hard drives with you and bring the data back to your studio. And unfortunately, if you come from other countries, then you have to bring your USB hard drives back home after a long day, and you need to do a lot of processing, and it's a lot of work. Now we know that the 4K technology has been mature, and it produces a whole lot of data every day. So if you adopt the ICT newest technology from Huawei, then all these data can be uploaded directly to the cloud, and people can remotely edit and download from the cloud, and it greatly promotes efficiency. So the above two examples are what ICT solutions can be commercialized. When we talk about industrialization and sustainable development, let's look at Industry 4.0. This is the fundamental structure. It's consisted of different aspects. Look at the top, application, and also Internet of Services, until the basic, the most fundamental, the Internet of Things, and also the service platform. Huawei focus the basics of this Industry 4.0, which is the two in the bottom. But in order to realize this Industry 4.0, we also face a lot of challenges. The biggest one is that traditional ICT infrastructures need to be restructured. In this process, we need to connectivity. That's the key. The first, we know that our old network connects people. The network connects billions of people in the world. And in the future, in the Industry 4.0 world, we need to connect all the devices everywhere, and also the sensors. That's the biggest challenge, the first one for us. The next challenge, we know that IoT, Internet of Things, especially in the remote real-time control, it requires the latency needs to be reduced from 5 milliseconds to 1 millisecond. That's to ensure the remote precise control. And the third aspect, in the Industry 3.0, all the data used to be in the self-control, your own ICT platform, your own cloud. And then in the Industry 4.0, all the ICT platforms will be open. All the data will be uploaded to the cloud, and through public network, it will be transmitted. So cybersecurity, data security also bring big challenges to us. The fourth aspect, so far, we lack a common standard ICT infrastructure in order to ensure in the connectivity in one sector and also cross sectors. So above is what in industrialization and sustainable development, what we're facing. Also, innovation can solve our challenges. Based on Huawei's strong R&D power, we've proposed the ICT architecture for Industrial 4.0, which is 5th generation. 5G and SDN have provided high quality and real-time network. And design, manufacturing, they can be coordinated across sectors and cross regions. And we can connect a lot of sectors and different sensors and devices, so we can cross sectors, cross regions, and this infrastructure becomes possible. In this ICT infrastructure, Huawei has the following innovations. First, we have a strong R&D chip ability. We've provided LTM. The sensor are using the same chip so that the connectivity is higher efficient. And we have a specific bit bandwidth so that enterprises can use low cost, but then develop their own IoT solutions. And we adopt the 5G technology. Within 1 kilometer square, we can have a lot of accessibility, and also the latency can be lowered to 1 millisecond. This can provide us ultra broadband access and also high definition camera access. Huawei in this sector, we are already leading the world, and we are working with partners to establish standards and hope that next year in the whole Europe we'll have the whole deployment. And the fourth, we have a smart IoT gateway, and so key for IoT. It provides support to different sectors and different devices. And also in our smart gateway, we have this security chip. It can identify different devices, and we can secure the transmission and obtainment of different data, and we can secure that it's safe. And also, business-driven ICT infrastructure innovation. We are facing the sector in the industry, and we're working with partners. We have more than 300 partners in product solutions. We are facing the Industry 4.0. We're working together. Now we have one example. Huawei is working with SAP and other world-leading partners to develop a big operation and maintenance system. In this big facility, we have this smart gateway, and we're always collecting data and upload it to the big data cloud. Analyzing these data, we can warn in advance to see something might break down. So with this system, we can predict 70% of the mistakes and raise the efficiency. That's a good example of how ICT supports the industry. As an ICT leader, Huawei will be more involved in the global standard organizations and promote sustainable development. Also, we know that Huawei, if we cannot work with the whole supply chain, then industrialization and sustainable development are impossible. So this platform, this forum is a very good platform so that Huawei and partners can build an ecosystem together and work on industrialization and sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, Huawei believes that this world will be a wholly connected world. Huawei will be devoted to ICT and contribute its power to industrialization and sustainable development of China and CEE countries. Thank you very much.
And as our fourth speaker, Mr. Corneliu Bodea, the president of the Romanian Energy Center, and he will also be talking about energy projects and their potential here in this region. Please, Mr. Bodea.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it is of a big advantage for me to speak after so many distinguished speakers, and it is also more easy to discuss about my topic, which will relate mainly on energy. So I believe that in the CE countries we are sharing a common type of energy infrastructure. And this is coming from a time when our industries, the main reason for existing an energy infrastructure, were developed in a centralized manner, based mainly on very intensive industries. And the last couple of decades, let's say last 20 years, brought so many changes in this economic model that it creates a big pressure on the energy field, on the energy generation, on the transport and distribution of energy, that it is obvious that all our infrastructures, doesn't matter if we speak about South, Eastern Europe, or Central and Eastern Europe, we need to address. I started by saying that it will be more easy for me to bring reasons on my discussion here, because we saw that, first of all, the economic environment is optimistic, and these countries are increasing the volume of exports, became more competitive, and the rate of growth in these countries is sometimes maybe double than the growth rate of other Western Europe countries. We also have the technology, and it is impressive, the amount of technology companies in China developed in the last couple of years. And by joining these two aspects, the need of a change, of a major change in the energy infrastructure in Eastern European countries, and capability to address Chinese technologies, I think that's a big opportunity here. And we don't have to take the long and hard way in the energy infrastructure in Eastern European countries. What we have to do, I think, is to make a shortcut, move directly to the latest technologies, because we need to address and re-engineer the infrastructure. We are speaking more and more about clean energy, renewables. We are speaking about Internet of Things, distributed generation. All these things, all these technologies, all these needs are coming in the same point altogether. And this is financing and the technology. Re-engineering the energy industry, that's not a new topic. This process has begun many years ago. What is creating probably the biggest pressure here is the fact that technology is moving very fast. And I was so impressed by the presentation of Huawei and the addressing the Internet of Things and the future of energy, which is based on distributed generation and storage and communication. This will bring important change and will challenge the traditional, the conventional energy infrastructure, based mainly on transport and distribution of the energy and generation of the energy in big centralized units. I am happy that back in 2014, I think, Romania decided into this 16+1 format to take the challenge and coordinate the Center for Dialogue for Energy, Dialogue and Cooperation for Energy in the 16+1 format. And this is not only because of the tradition of the Romanian energy sector And also not only because Romania it's just developing big projects with China, but it's also because Romania have the knowledge and the resources to become an important player in the energy business within the Central and Eastern European countries. My vision was to start organizing and putting together the pieces for this Center for Dialogue and Cooperation in the Energy, starting from 5 main directions that were also adopted by the European Union in cooperation with China for the energy development. And this is about renewable energy, energy efficiency, smart grids, clean coal, and nuclear energy. The role of the Center for Dialogue and Cooperation in Energy in 16+1 format will not be the one to come and compete the common interest project of the European Union. But what I believe is that the energy policy of the European Union is strong, but we have enough spaces to fill within these initiatives. We have a lot of improvements and investments, mainly in the field of communication, interconnections, smart grids, Internet of Things, that are not addressed by the common interest projects, that for sure this availability to technology that we have within the 16 Central and Eastern European countries, but also in China, and the potential of developing common projects in this direction is huge. I will refer now more to our task as coordinator for Center for Dialogue and Cooperation in Energy in the 16+1 format. We are just at the very beginning. Romanian Center of Energy, an organization that I'm president of, is happy that we were awarded with the responsibility of organizing this center, and we are just starting to build a program for 2017, which will be our first full year of activity, and we are focusing on building very pragmatic events, chances for cooperation, for meeting, for exchange of experience between the 16+1 countries, and within this format with respect to the energy. A few words about Romanian Energy Center. Romanian Energy Center is already a 6 years old organization. It's an NGO based in Bucharest and Brussels. We have among our members the most important Romanian energy companies, and I am very happy that we have today with us representatives from both state-owned private companies in the energy sector like Nuclear Electrica, Hydroelectrica, Adrem Invest, a private supplier of systems for the energy sector. And our main task is to represent the interests of the Romanian energy field in respect to other international organizations or formats, also the 16+1 format, and not last, the European Union organizations. We are organizing a main event in Brussels every year that became a tradition. It's a Romanian Energy Day in Brussels. We organized, this year was our second presence in the European Parliament, and we were very happy to have with us the Commissioner for Energy and Climate Change, Mr. Cañete. We spend almost all our efforts in trying to promote the energy infrastructure values and energy companies in Romania interest. Now we have to enhance our activity, and we have to move to this new challenge of organizing and bringing value in this Center for Dialogue and Cooperation in Energy in the 16+1 format. The main critical aspect, I would say, that will be transforming the and will help our success and will transform our initiative in a success will be the participation and cooperation of the 16+1 country. So it's also my task here today to make an announcement that here we are, we're existing. Our name is Center for Dialogue and Cooperation in the Energy Project in the 16+1 format. We have a website, you will have all our details, and please don't hesitate to contact us and bring us opportunities for helping different projects and different cooperation. Doesn't matter if we speak about research and development, exchange of knowledge, or financing, or really business partnership and projects. I strongly believe that the future in energy will be of an interconnected energy infrastructure. And I strongly believe that the efficiency in using the energy will come from the consume, which really rely on technology and on communication. And energy now, these days, became a very, very complicated issue. And it's not only about being efficient in generating, it's putting all together all aspects of the energy value chain. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Baudet. We've raised a lot of very important and interesting issues in the presentations. I think I want to start with a very global question, which is that all the CE16 countries want to make their industries more sustainable and want to move up the value chain in terms of what they're producing. And the question is how exactly Chinese investment, Chinese presence here can help the countries do that. And we've heard about Huawei's plans, and but I would like to start with Mr. Baoping. Actually, you have Mr. Baudet was speaking about all the efficiencies we can get with energy production. How in particular do you see energy production as a way of making production more sustainable and also more high value, Mr. Baoping? And where do you see the potential for Central and Eastern Europe to develop?
That's a very good question. Well, firstly, we need to improve the structure of energy. For instance, our experience means that we need to accelerate the development of renewable energy, clean energy. The size of the Chinese energy is very large, and it is able to meet our economic demands. However, we feel that during this process of development, there are several issues. For instance, coal-fired station now still accounts for a large proportion of the total, about over 60 or 70%. And this means lots of issues, for instance, pollutions and emissions. And this will harm the environment. So now I'm in Latvia, as I've just mentioned. You have heavy snows here, and the air is very clean and sweet. Beijing, in the past few days, suffered from smog. Why is that? Because it's in winter, and in winter we need to fire coal for heating. So that's the experience and lessons we learned from the past development. And now Chinese government requires companies to increase the share of renewable energy used. We also signed the Paris Agreement, and we committed that in the future, 20% of our energy needs to be from renewable energies by 2030. That's the first point. Secondly, we need to further develop the technology and improve the energy mix. Technological innovation is especially important. Just now, Mr. Baudia mentioned a few points. I think all of these are valuable ones, and I agree with you. With the technological development, we can do better. For instance, as Huawei just mentioned, distributional generation and many other technologies. All of these are very beneficial to those cores. As a traditional power generator, we need to embrace these new developments and use these new technologies to renovate, to transform ourselves. We need to apply these new technologies to our traditional business. Thirdly, CEE countries should pay attention to foreign investment and to further open themselves. CEE countries and EU countries, CEE countries and Chinese companies, all of these are good directions. China has been developing rapidly, both in terms of size and in terms of speed. I think it's fair to say that it's a miracle. Earlier this year, I accompanied our president to South Africa. South Africa, the installed capacity is about 6,000 kilowatts, and the total South Africa continent is about 110 million kilowatts. However, our company, Guodian, by itself accounts for 140 million kilowatts. So for CEE countries, it's important to learn from other countries and to attract foreign investment. The fourth point is about two-way cooperation. CEE countries, well, just now, Mr. Baudia mentioned lots of CEE countries, including Romania and Latvia, have advanced energy technologies and advanced managerial expertise. There are lots of areas for us to further explore, and we can also involve the third party to cooperate together. All of these are a possible path. Thank you.
Question for our representatives from the CEE, for Mr. Kazaks and Mr. Bodea. In view of the price structure of energy right now, for oil, for coal, for gas, how effective are these sustainable energies now? How is this cost effective for our region to concentrate on these? And I know, for instance, Romania is investing a lot of money or planning to build a nuclear power plant together with China. And how does that fit into the energy mix? Maybe you could answer this.
Who first?
You can start.
Thank you. I think that is inevitable. Okay, I'll give you a story from my life. I used to do PhD in economics, and I was studying in London, and I had a kind of office mate from China, and I remember it was a very hot day during the summer in London, and we were fantasizing what we could do when we retire, okay? And his story was, I'd love to come back to London because it is not that many people around, you know, and it's quite good air and all these kind of things, you know. And for me, that was the worst, you know, weather that you could have, very hot, polluted, and that kind of thing. So in Latvia, of course, the air quality, you know, and these things are much, much better, as Mr. Baoping noticed. So these things are simply going to become increasingly valued and increasingly important. So from the demand side, clean environment is very important. And there, of course, energy supplies that are clean are going to be increasingly more valued. Another thing is, so it's going to be demand driven very much as well. Another thing as well, supply. We see that there is a rapid increase in alternatives. We see that energy can be much more environmentally friendly. Okay? It is less fossil. And there's this famous saying that the end of kind of the Stone Age didn't end because of the lack of stones. It does not mean that the fossil energy is going to disappear and it's not going to be used, but there are going to be increasingly other sources of energy that are going to be cost-wise, perhaps at some point even cheaper than fossil energy. And at the moment, lower energy prices, what they're doing, they're only kind of prolonging the period of substitution. But at the same time, we see that alternative sources of energy are becoming increasingly competitive cost-wise. And there's a fantastic picture, unfortunately I haven't got it with me, but if you take a look at the cost of the solar energy, 5-6 years ago, it was uncomparable on average with the fossil energy. Okay, now the cost is very close, in some cases even cheaper. Okay, so this is a technological progress that simply goes that way. And this is changing. You know, cheaper fossil prices will only prolong this period, but technologies are ready to provide energy in a cleaner way at a reasonable cost.
Mr. Budaya?
Yes, so coming back to your question, I would say that that's a very good question, and one maybe the most important topic that we would like to address firstly in the 16+1 format, cooperation for energy, will be the fact that if we speak about the 16 country, Central and Eastern European countries, most of these countries are members of the European Union, and the rest are in a certain stage of becoming members. So what I believe is that we need to concentrate a bit with our partners in China with respect of a better understanding of the European legislation within the European Union with respect to energy pricing, energy market. Because the energy market is the key to finally address any investment project and, of course, any technology. Because you need to sell the energy that you are going to generate. That's why I believe that an area where we can contribute and that it obviously needs to be improved is to bring a better communication between the Chinese partners and the Eastern European countries on the energy legislation and framework for manufacturing, generating, but mainly using the energy. If we come to the cost of the energy, of course that this is, unfortunately, we are living now in an what is called vulnerable and unpredictable environment. And the geostrategical and political changes in all the world, but mainly within Europe and Asia, are so huge that the impact on the economy and the impact on the prices and on the market, it's quite unpredictable. That's why the way to go will be the best and the latest technologies always, because this is bringing the real efficiency. And if we look to the renewables, for example, that renewables in Europe, it's still, under a big reform, and as far as I know, within 2017 we'll have a big revision on the renewable directives of the European Union. But we all saw that yesterday, I think, COP21 was signed by all the countries. So what we are talking about is that these technologies, cheap or not, there is a common statement of 79 countries or something like that to reduce the CO2 and the global warming effects. And the way to realize that will be to continue in focusing on developing renewable technologies on the energy also. And also, maybe mainly into focusing in the way that we use the energy and increasing the energy efficiency. So all these three elements, which is the market, the price of the energy, the technology to generate the energy, and the technology to bring energy efficiency in consuming the energy, are connected topics, and these are the main topics that have to be addressed in the future.
Okay, Mr. Jun, Chinese companies are looking for investment opportunities. CEE countries are looking to move up the value chain. Where do you see the synergy between these two desires, and what do you think are the competitive advantages specifically of the CEE region?
Okay, I think there are two aspects. The first one would be internationalization, how during this process different sectors are working together. Huawei is an international company, and it's a good example of internationalization and industrialization. We know for the past decades, the internationalization trend is irreversible. Including technology, products, talent has been flowing around the world and is promoting economy. And it's formed a global connected cooperation in sectors. Huawei is working in ICT. We have been promoting the development and technology of ICT and facilitating the internationalization and industrialization around the world. Huawei has taken Europe as our second local market. Huawei has our own European strategies, and that's our second local market. So we have two demands. How does Huawei integrate into Europe? Second, how can Huawei integrate all the advantages in European countries into Huawei, into the international supply chain? So let me share. First point, how does Huawei integrate into Europe? Huawei company basically is a Chinese company, but we've always think that Huawei Poland is a Polish company, Huawei Czech is a Czech company, and Huawei Latvia is a Latvian country. We are a local company. We need to comply with the local legislation, and we need to be qualified locally. In this, let me introduce a few points. First, in the globe, Huawei has 16 R&D centers around the world, and there are 8 in Europe. And in Europe, we also work with clients and partners to establish a lot of innovation centers. When we integrate technologies into Europe, we also cultivate local talent. For example, in Czech Republic, in Poland, we have our own training center. Every year, we provide hundreds of people, whether they're clients or local experts, we are training them. Also in Europe, we choose from top universities from Europe And we choose these students to make them. This is a golden seed project that we invite European graduates to go to China to learn about our most updated innovations. Also here in CEE countries, we have established a lot of R&D centers. We focus on big data, clouds, and smart city, big calculation. We are working on relevant innovations and technologies. That's how we integrate ourselves into Europe. Also, we value the European market. CEE countries are also an important market for us. CEE regions, I think, is a hub for our strategy. Not just a hub, but also something that connects the Central Asia, Northern Africa, and Northern Europe. That's a hub that connects these areas. For example, in Hungary, we have a European center to make sure that all the products are going to Central Europe, Northern Africa, and Northern Europe. And also in Romania, we have this global finance center. We use the abundant talent locally and to support the internationalization of Huawei. And that's the key of our European strategy.
Looking more broadly, I was preparing for this panel discussion. I looked at some data about Chinese investment in the 16 countries, and it's grown fantastically in the last years. If you look from 2009 to 2014, it's almost quadrupled from about 400 million USD to 1.7 billion, according to the data that I saw. But we see big differences between countries. There are certain countries where there's a lot of very strong growth, Poland and Hungary, for instance. Other countries where we see little growth, Latvia, Estonia, some others. I was wondering, I would like to ask each of the panel members what they think. How do you explain these differences, and can something be done to overcome them, to have more investment in all the countries? Is that something we should aim for? Maybe I could start with Mr. Baudet and move down the line. Do you see, how do you explain these differences in Chinese investment in the various CEE countries?
Yes, I've also noticed this difference, and what I believe is that it definitely depends on the bilateral cooperation between the countries. And on one hand, we see maybe a lot of cooperation on the, let's say, private sector level. And there might be countries which are better in accepting and inviting and stimulating foreign investments. And that's natural. China being one of the biggest investor in foreign areas, it's obvious that the country that has better investment, foreign investment activity will have more of Chinese investments. This is one thing. The other thing is that on the cooperation for huge big projects, in Romania, for example, now there are 3 big projects under development. One is on nuclear, there is one on hydro and coal, clean coal technology in generation, all the 3 energy generation. So if maybe only one of these 3 projects will succeed, then Romania will increase also in the cooperation with China. But the 16+1 format, it's a 16+1 format. What I believe is that the value of this format is not relies mainly on the bilateral. And what for example, what we would like to bring with this Center for Dialogue and Cooperation in the energy in this format will be regional investment, regional development, and not necessarily bilateral cooperation. Because bilateral cooperation, I think, needs to be a bilateral development and support. But if we look in, as I've mentioned before, if we look into this energy infrastructure in the Central and Eastern European countries, we share common challenges and I strongly believe into regional cooperation with China.
Thank you, Mr. Jun. Very good, Mr. Bopping.
Chinese investment in CEE countries are more in some countries and less in some countries. There is some unbalanced situation. The more countries with more investment, they will work more together, and with the less investment countries, how do we acquaint each other and expand the investment? There are 4 aspects, I think. The first one, we need to expand the support. The government have to support with all they can the cooperation from China and other countries into their local economy. This is the fundamental principle. This time, Premier Li Keqiang from China State Council, after his visit, I think it's providing a leading force for Chinese enterprises. We are now paying more attention that coming to Latvia, governments are very proactive and very welcoming for Chinese enterprises. That's the first point. Second point, we need to optimize the investment environment. We need to create a good environment for these investors. We need to comply with local legislations, at the same time creating a good political environment for foreign investments. That's the 2 sides of a coin. We can not only focus on complying with local legislations and ignore how to welcome the foreign investments. For the past 30 years, China has been developing very well because China has been sticking to this opening up policy and creating a good environment for investments. The third point would be we need to promote enterprises cooperation, because eventually the real operation between the both sides will be something that realize the continual growth in economy. We need to identify enterprises that match the local needs. We need to promote and market ourselves and understand your advantages and needs. Fourth, we need to promote the win-win situation. Whatever enterprise, wherever you are from, when you come to China or to Latvia to invest, it has to be a mutually beneficial relationship, because a company is a company as long as it's matching its business model and matching the market environment. As long as they can benefit from the market, then we can ensure that, so as we mentioned in the beginning, some countries are receiving less investment. Maybe they'll improve in the future. Thank you.
I'll move to Mr. Jun and let Martin finish up. Mr. Jun.
According to my understanding, in Europe, Huawei is investing around $100 million in R&D, but frankly, maybe the investment in each region is different. But for Huawei, we think we can bring to Europe greater values in terms of the whole globalization in the supply chain, whether in the new or old industries, facing industry 4.0. How do we help our clients to reform and adapt to a new needs and environment? That's the greatest value we bring to Europe. That's why we think that in Europe, in CEE countries, we have more and more clients, including governmental, electricity, transportation, and big industries. Big enterprises are choosing Huawei as a digital transformation partner.
Thank you. And finally, Martin.
I think there is one fundamental thing, that trade can be beneficial for both partners. And in most cases, it is beneficial for both. Okay, so I think there is no argument about that. Why is this that some countries have been more integrated with, for instance, with China and Europe than others? Well, I can only speculate. There are many things. For instance, in the past, growth has been quite strong already, so we could tap into other pockets. Now, if you take a look at the global growth has slowed, and it's not 1 year. It's already kind of quite a long period when growth is relatively strong, relatively weak. So to strengthen the growth, many countries have realized that trade provides new potential. Okay. Also, we see that there are some geopolitical shifts as well. So this as well changes the scenery. But overall, I think Mr. Baoping very eloquently put what needs to be done. I would say, okay, past is past. In the past, perhaps, and I would say not perhaps, but surely, CEEC-Economies and Latvia, for that matter, had paid too little attention to these trade flows, to these cooperation possibilities. Okay? From now on, hopefully, these things are going to improve, and that is going to be mutually beneficial. So it's going to be a win-win situation for both partners, being them small or big.
Thank you, Martin. We have about 10 minutes for questions, a little more. So I understand there's a person with a microphone back there, so please, questions. No questions, really? Over there, please.
My name is Dr. Zemanek. I come from Poland. I would like to fully agree with what Mr. Boda said about regional cooperation, because I represent the association CEEC countries China, and I strongly believe that what you said, that our cooperation should not be bilateral but regional. And I fully agree with Mr. Baoping that the cooperation should be based on win-win situation. In October, I was in Anhui. I noticed that the problem in Anhui, like a problem in China, are similar to Poland, because our economy is based on coal. So for this reason, we should think what to do in order to improve our environment, in order to limit the emissions. This is the target which we should have. And I fully agree with Mr. Boda that, and I declare that my members will join you and will discuss with you the possibilities of using the new technologies, because new technologies is something what is needed, and we'll use them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Maybe I just
Martin,
give a comment with respect to the new technologies. That's not an issue of luxury. New technologies is the issue of survival. If somebody else uses it, we don't, we're falling behind, and that's going to be very clearly shown into our pockets, what happens with our incomes, what happens with our income levels, what happens with our living standards. Okay, so this is the thing that everybody has to join in, and we saw kind of very, very interesting things in Mr. Jun's presentation. For instance, the transport sector and overall spillover of technologies. That is simply coming, and if we are not ready, then we fall behind. And you can be ready if you cooperate. And that all drives for simply more cooperation, more knowledge sharing, for more globalization. And if somebody kind of lags behind, they are very likely to lose out.
Okay, question there.
Thank you. My name is Ando Sutter. I'm CEO of Estonian National Utility. And the question actually comes to understand a little bit why we can't speed up this cooperation with the technology transfer, as we are just were tendering the equipment for the biggest Baltic wind park. And we were especially approaching a few Chinese producers of the wind generators to participate on the tender. We had 5 or 6 world top leading producers, but unfortunately we didn't receive a piece from the Chinese producers. Can you comment on what can be really the reasons we can't them to be active here?
Does anyone have something to say? Mr. Bauping, Mr. Bodea? Mr. Bodea, or Mr. Bauping, maybe you have something, a comment on this?
I'm not sure about the public tendering, the specifics. In China, wind power companies, all of them will be involved in a public tendering for a project. To win a bid, first you need to have good quality equipment, reliable equipment, and also you need to have some price advantages. Currently, in the wind power area, Chinese governments require public tendering for every project. So Chinese wind power companies, they have certain advantages. Especially in recent years, the development of wind power has gained some big achievements. The scale of wind power is very large. We have mature technology. The cost of wind power equipment is constantly going down, and the competition is very fierce. So Chinese wind power companies, they are constantly transforming and growing themselves. That's why they are able to gain a position internationally. We welcome you to join our public tendering. And the size of our projects are all very big, higher than 3 million kilowatts. Thank you.
A recommendation for how, say, the Estonians can get Chinese companies to participate in these tenders. You have some experience with this.
Yes, so I should answer? Or?
Yeah.
That's all about what I was speaking before, the fact that we need to, and the Center for Dialogue and Cooperation in the energy sector, it's one of its objectives in trying to bring a better communication and understanding on bidding procedures, and maybe why not building a more open interface for companies in China and projects in the Central and Eastern European countries, but why not also vice versa, so bringing European technology to Chinese projects. So there is a lot to be improved here. What I see now in the wind power industry is that there are some huge projects in Europe. I believe that most of the Chinese manufacturers in the wind technology are involved in both national China projects, so probably they're overloaded with orders, and there are some also big projects in Northern Europe and Germany. It might be, that's the reason.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Over there, please.
各位领导好，大家好啊。
Good afternoon. My name is Zhong Haibo. I'm from Shenzhen, China. To answer One Belt, One Road, small and medium-sized companies in Shenzhen, be it SOE or private companies, have established a Shenzhen CEEC Economic and Cultural Promotion Association. Last month, we had the first meeting in Shenzhen. We had ambassadors and entrepreneurs from over 10 countries. Out of the 16 countries, we had over 100 participants. It is one of the one of the biggest events ever held in Shenzhen. Tomorrow we'll have another meeting at the 27th floor. tomorrow 6 p.m. and we sincerely invite all of you to come to our meeting. We as SMEs, we'd also to make our due contributions to the development of Latvia and CEEC countries.
Good intervention gives people an opportunity to build these connections and synergies that we've been talking about. I think we're out of time. I think we've had a very interesting discussion. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to everyone for coming. And I wish you a very constructive and fruitful conference in making connections and building these relationships. Thank you very much.